What if everything you've been taught about money, abundance, and financial security has been completely backwards? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Most people spend their entire lives chasing material provision, desperately trying to accumulate wealth through external means. Better jobs, more clients, perfect investments, or even lottery tickets. They believe that abundance flows from banks, currencies, market conditions, or economic circumstances beyond their control. Has this ever happened to you? You've worked harder, saved more, followed every financial guru's advice, yet true prosperity seems to slip through your fingers like sand. Here's what might shock you. You've been looking in completely the wrong direction. The revolutionary truth that spiritual teacher Emmet Fox discovered and what ancient wisdom has been trying to tell us for centuries is that material provision is never the cause. It's always the effect. The real source of abundance doesn't exist in any external circumstance, institution, or economic system. It originates in something far more powerful and accessible than you've ever imagined. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you approach prosperity, success, and financial freedom for the rest of your life. The secret lies in understanding that true provision is born, grows, and manifests in consciousness itself, not in your bank account, not in your paycheck, not in market fluctuations, but in the very fabric of your awareness and belief system. This isn't some mystical concept or wishful thinking. It's what Fox called the highest law and most liberating truth available to human beings. Think about this for a moment. Every single thing that exists in the material world first existed as an idea, a vision, a possibility held in someone's consciousness. The device you're watching this on, the building you're sitting in, the very words you're hearing right now, all of it began as invisible thoughts before becoming visible reality. Yet when it comes to abundance and provision, we somehow forget this fundamental principle and start believing that external conditions determine our internal experience. What if I told you that the divine plan for your life, yes, your specific life, includes complete provision, not scarce, provision that requires you to struggle and compete, not conditional provision that depends on your performance or circumstances, not intermittent provision that comes and goes based on economic cycles. Complete provision flowing naturally from the pure principle of love and wisdom that doesn't create incomplete beings or send souls to earth with built-in deficiencies. This understanding changes everything about how we approach money, career, relationships, and life itself. When you grasp that, consciousness is the vessel that determines how much good can flow into your experience. You stop trying to enlarge the ocean and start expanding the container. You stop begging for water and start building a bigger cup. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and why this ancient wisdom feels so revolutionary in our modern world. If you're serious about transforming your relationship with abundance and want access to more practical spiritual wisdom like this, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Every video is carefully crafted to give you tools that actually work when applied consistently. The hidden truth behind this transformation lies in understanding that consciousness operates exactly like a vessel. Imagine holding a small cup under a waterfall. No matter how powerful that waterfall is, you can only receive what your cup can contain. The water itself has no limits, it's abundant and endless, but your container determines your experience. This is the precise mechanism behind why some people seem to effortlessly attract opportunities, wealth, and success, while others struggle despite working twice as hard. Your consciousness is that vessel, and here's what most people don't realize. The shape and size of your vessel isn't determined by your education, your background, your connections, or even your current circumstances. It's determined by something much more fundamental: your belief system, your deep feelings, and the internal images you carry about money, value, and your own worthiness. This is where the journey gets intensely personal and profoundly revealing. If your mind consistently holds fear about money, if you've internalized beliefs about scarcity, if distrust has become your default setting when it comes to abundance, then these mental patterns literally become the shape of your vessel. The universe, operating in perfect obedience to this law, cannot pour more into your experience than you can mentally and emotionally hold. Think about the decisions you make when fear is driving. You hesitate on opportunities. You settle for less than you deserve. You second-guess your instincts. You play it safe when boldness is required. Each of these choices reinforces the small vessel, keeping you trapped in cycles that feel frustratingly familiar. The impact isn't just financial. It affects your relationships, your health, your sense of purpose, everything. But here's where this revelation becomes genuinely life-changing. If consciousness shapes the vessel, then by transforming your consciousness, you literally reshape your capacity to receive. You're not trying to convince the universe to give you more. You're expanding your ability to contain what's already flowing toward you. The abundance exists, the opportunities exist, the pathways exist. The question isn't whether they're available, but whether you're available to them. When you start examining the behind-the-scenes programming that's been running your vessel, you discover some fascinating patterns. Maybe you inherited beliefs about money being scarce or difficult to earn. Perhaps you absorbed ideas about wealthy people being somehow corrupt or greedy. Or possibly you developed deep feelings of unworthiness that whisper you don't deserve more than you currently have. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're active forces shaping your daily reality. They influence which jobs you apply for, how you price your services, whether you negotiate or accept the first offer, how you invest your time and energy. Your mindset literally creates a magnetic field that either attracts or repels the very things you say you want. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because there's a specific technique that can rapidly transform your vessel, and it's been hiding in plain sight for decades. What you're about to learn has helped thousands of people break through their invisible barriers and start experiencing abundance in ways that seemed impossible just weeks before. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to expand my vessel," if this resonates with you. This technique is so elegantly simple that most people dismiss it at first glance, yet it's been responsible for some of the most dramatic financial transformations I've ever witnessed. It's called the Golden Key, and the power lies not in its complexity, but in its precision. The entire method can be summarized in one revolutionary shift. Don't occupy yourself with the problem. Occupy yourself with God as the source. Most people do exactly the opposite. When money gets tight, they obsess over the bills. When opportunities disappear, they analyze what went wrong. When fear creeps in, they focus intensely on the very thing they're afraid of losing. This creates a vicious cycle where your mental energy feeds the problem, making it grow stronger and more persistent in your experience. The Golden Key technique interrupts this destructive pattern by redirecting your consciousness toward the true source of all provision. Instead of thinking about money, you think only of God as your source. Instead of calculating and worrying, you turn your thoughts away from the financial situation entirely and focus on the infinite intelligence that governs all supply. You repeat this mental shift over and over until something remarkable happens. The fear disappears. Here's what's happening behind the scenes during this process. Fear is essentially a signal that you're believing in limitation, that you're seeing the problem as bigger than the solution. When you consistently redirect your attention to the unlimited source, you're training your consciousness to recognize a larger reality. You're literally reprogramming your vessel to hold a different frequency, one that's aligned with abundance rather than scarcity. The transformation happens because you stop feeding energy to the fearful thoughts and start nourishing the faith-based ones. It's like switching the channel from a horror movie to a nature documentary. Same screen, completely different experience. Your mind begins to relax, your perspective shifts, and suddenly you start noticing opportunities and solutions that were invisible when you were trapped in problem-focused thinking. What makes this technique so powerful is that it acknowledges a fundamental truth about how the universe operates. The Creator's action never ceases. The current of divine supply is constant, flowing every moment of every day without interruption. If abundance isn't manifesting in your life, the issue isn't with the source. The source is perfect and inexhaustible. The issue is with your reception, with the floodgates of your consciousness. Think about this revelation for a moment. The same intelligence that coordinates billions of stars, manages countless ecosystems, and keeps your heart beating without your conscious effort is also the source of your provision. This intelligence doesn't take breaks, doesn't have bad days, doesn't get affected by economic downturns or political changes. It's continuously creating, continuously providing, continuously flowing. The problem isn't in the source, but in our disposition, our mental gates, our inherited beliefs about how provision works. Many of us carry unconscious images of God as distant, unpredictable, or requiring us to suffer before we can receive. These distorted images create internal resistance that blocks the natural flow of good into our lives. When you practice the golden key consistently, you begin to experience God not as a cosmic vending machine you need to convince, but as the very life force expressing itself through you. Your decisions start coming from trust rather than fear. Your mindset shifts from survival to creativity. The impact ripples through every area of your life because you're operating from a completely different foundational understanding. Now, what most people don't realize is that this technique works best when combined with a specific understanding about wisdom and how it functions as spiritual capital. Write in the comments, "I trust the source," if you're feeling this shift happening. The wisdom that functions as spiritual capital operates on a completely different economic system than what most of us learned growing up. Traditional economics asks, "How much do you have?" Spiritual economy asks a fundamentally different question. How much do you believe is possible? This shift in perspective creates an entirely new foundation for understanding wealth, success, and abundance. Here's where the journey becomes intensely revealing. Most people spend their entire lives observing their bank account, tracking market fluctuations, calculating their net worth based on external measurements. But spiritual economy operates on the principle that everything visible is simply a reflection of the invisible. Your external financial situation is showing you a mirror of your internal belief system, nothing more and nothing less. If this content added value to your day and you felt that spark of recognition while listening, a simple like really helps this message reach others who might need to hear it right now. This means that trying to change your financial reality by focusing solely on external strategies is like trying to change your reflection by manipulating the mirror. You can move the mirror around, clean it, even break it, but until you change what's standing in front of it, the reflection remains fundamentally the same. The real transformation happens when you start working with the source of the reflection, your consciousness, your beliefs, your inner images about what's possible for your life. What's absolutely revolutionary about this understanding is that it reveals something most people never consider. Scarcity is not from God. It never was. It never will be. Scarcity is simply a reflection of consciousness that has forgotten its true inheritance. When you really absorb this truth, it changes everything about how you approach challenges, decisions, and opportunities. Think about the implications behind this revelation. If scarcity isn't divinely ordained, if limitation isn't part of some cosmic plan for your life, then what you're experiencing as financial struggle or lack is actually a case of mistaken identity. You've forgotten who you really are and what you're actually entitled to as a spiritual being having a human experience. Your real task isn't to struggle harder for more money, fight against economic systems, or figure out complex investment strategies. Your task is much simpler and infinitely more powerful. Remember who you are. You are a child of God, which means you carry the same creative intelligence that designed the universe. You are a bearer of divine mind, which means you have access to ideas, insights, and innovations that can transform any situation. You are an heir to all real wealth, which means abundance is your natural inheritance, not something you need to earn or deserve. This remembering process doesn't happen overnight, but when it starts clicking, the impact is unmistakable. Your decisions begin flowing from confidence rather than desperation. Your mindset shifts from "how can I get more" to "how can I express more of what I already am?" The hidden truth is that you've never actually lacked anything. You've simply been operating from a limited understanding of your true nature and capabilities. The transformation accelerates when you realize that every moment you spend worried about money, every decision you make from fear, every compromise you accept because you believe you have no choice, all of this is actually an investment in the illusion of scarcity. You're using your divine creative power to manifest exactly what you don't want, simply because you've forgotten how powerful you actually are. Now, this raises a crucial question about how we practically apply this wisdom in daily life, especially when it comes to the specific actions that bridge spiritual understanding with tangible results. Write in the comments, "I remember who I am," if this truth is resonating deep within you. The bridge between spiritual understanding and tangible results lies in recognizing wisdom as your original capital. This isn't wisdom in the academic sense, collecting degrees or memorizing information. This is wisdom as a superior state of consciousness, the fundamental currency with which the human soul can acquire any other good. It's the one asset that can never be stolen, never loses value, and actually multiplies when you share it. Here's what's happening behind the scenes when you operate from this understanding. From the very beginning in Genesis, when God blesses humanity and gives dominion over the earth, something profound is established. Conscious thought becomes the official channel through which your divine inheritance expresses itself. Not luck, not circumstances, not who you know or where you were born. Conscious thought, your ability to think clearly, purposefully, and in alignment with truth, becomes your primary tool for manifesting abundance. This revelation transforms how you approach every decision, every challenge, every opportunity. Instead of feeling powerless when circumstances seem difficult, you recognize that you have access to the same creative intelligence that governs galaxies and orchestrates the perfect timing of seasons. Your mindset shifts from "what can I get from this situation" to "what wisdom can I apply to transform this situation?" The journey of acquiring this transformational wisdom happens through three distinct pathways, and here's what most people miss. None of these can substitute for the others. You need all three working together to create the kind of consciousness that naturally attracts abundance. It's like a three-legged stool. Remove any leg and the whole structure becomes unstable. The first pathway is disciplined study. This means consistently exposing your mind to truth, not just any information, but wisdom that elevates your consciousness and expands your understanding of how spiritual laws operate in practical life. Your mind literally becomes what it feeds on, so disciplined study acts like premium fuel for your consciousness. When you regularly nourish your mind with elevated ideas, your thoughts naturally begin operating at a higher frequency. The second pathway is deep observation. This involves becoming a student of life itself, watching how spiritual principles play out in real situations, studying successful people not just for their strategies, but for their consciousness, noticing patterns in how abundance flows and blocks in various circumstances. Deep observation refines your mind, helping you recognize opportunities and solutions that others miss because they're operating from a more superficial level of awareness. The third pathway is scientific prayer. This isn't begging or pleading with God for favors. Scientific prayer is the practice of aligning your consciousness with divine intelligence, tuning your mental frequency to match the harmony of the universe. When you pray scientifically, you're not trying to change God's mind. You're changing your own mind to receive what's already being offered. This communion tunes your consciousness like tuning a radio to receive a clear signal. The impact of developing all three pathways simultaneously is extraordinary. Your mind becomes nourished by truth, refined by experience, and tuned by divine communion. Decisions start flowing from wisdom rather than reaction. Problems begin revealing solutions more quickly. The hidden truth is that when you invest in developing your consciousness this way, you're building capital that generates returns in every area of your life. Now, there's a specific technique that accelerates this wisdom development process, and it involves a practice that most people have completely misunderstood about how to actually engage with spiritual texts. Write in the comments, "Wisdom is my capital," if you're ready to start building this foundation. This technique for engaging with spiritual texts is so fundamentally different from how most people read that it can revolutionize your entire relationship with wisdom and knowledge. It's called meditative reading, and the method is both ancient and precisely calibrated to transform consciousness rather than just transfer information. Here's how the transformation happens. You take a sacred text, whether it's from Proverbs, the Sermon on the Mount, or any passage that contains spiritual truth, and you read it aloud 3 times with completely different intentions for each reading. The first time, you're simply hearing the words, letting them register in your awareness without trying to analyze or understand. You're training your mind to receive before it tries to interpret. The second reading is where you begin discovering the deeper meaning behind the words. You're not rushing through to get to the end. You're allowing each phrase to reveal its significance. Your mind starts making connections, seeing patterns, recognizing wisdom that might have been invisible during the first reading. This is where most people stop, thinking they've gotten what they need from the text. But the third reading is where the real magic happens. This time, you're allowing your soul to assimilate what you've received. You're not reading for information anymore. You're reading for transformation. The words begin working on you at a cellular level, reshaping your consciousness from the inside out. Then comes the crucial final step. You keep silence. In that silence, something profound occurs. God speaks. This isn't metaphorical language. In that silence, after your mind has been properly prepared through the 3 readings, divine intelligence begins communicating directly with your consciousness. Ideas emerge that weren't there before. Solutions become clear. Understanding dawns that goes far beyond what the words themselves contained. Your mind is no longer discussing or elaborating. It's receiving, being re-educated by the Spirit itself. The impact of this practice, when done consistently, is extraordinary. It's like the difference between gulping water when you're thirsty versus slowly savoring a fine wine. Both involve liquid, but the experience and the effect are completely different. Most people consume spiritual truth like fast food, quickly, unconsciously, without proper digestion. Meditative reading is like a gourmet meal for your consciousness. This process connects directly to one of the most powerful teachings about abundance found in the parable of talents. Each servant receives capital and is required not simply to maintain it, but to multiply it. This isn't just a nice story about money management. It's a profound revelation about how spiritual law operates in practical life. The talent represents wisdom, insight, creative capacity, the very things we've been discussing. Those who receive 5 talents and convert them to 10 have worked with practical intelligence. They understood that gifts are meant to grow, abilities are meant to expand, consciousness is meant to evolve. They didn't bury their talents in fear or maintain them cautiously. They invested them boldly and saw magnificent returns. Consider subscribing if this kind of content serves your growth journey. We share these teachings because they have the power to create real change in people's lives, and I'd love to have you as part of this community that's committed to conscious living. Here's the hidden truth behind this parable that most people miss. You're not being asked to create something from nothing. You're being asked to multiply what you've already been given. Every person receives talents, unique combinations of abilities, insights, experiences, and consciousness. The question isn't whether you have talents, but whether you're actively multiplying them or unconsciously burying them. The transformation happens when you realize that everything you've learned, every insight you've gained, every moment of expanded consciousness is meant to be invested, not hoarded. Write in the comments, "I multiply my gifts," if you're ready to start investing your talents rather than burying them. When you start investing your talents rather than burying them, you discover something that completely transforms how faith operates in your life. Most people carry what I call static faith, a passive belief system that resignedly awaits whatever destiny might bring. This kind of faith sits back, hoping for the best, praying for miracles, but essentially remaining inactive. It's actually superstition disguised as virtue, and it produces minimal results because it misunderstands the very nature of how divine power works. Through human consciousness, dynamic faith operates on a completely different frequency. It's faith as creative power, constantly in movement toward good. Instead of waiting for something to happen to you, dynamic faith recognizes that you are the channel through which something happens. It's the difference between being a passive observer of your life and being an active participant in creating your experience. This shift in mindset changes everything about how you approach challenges, opportunities, and daily decisions. Here's what's happening behind the scenes when you operate with dynamic faith. You begin to understand that God doesn't give riches. God gives the power to make them. This isn't a subtle distinction, it's a complete paradigm shift that affects every aspect of how you relate to abundance and success. God doesn't deposit money directly into your hands like some cosmic ATM machine. Instead, divine intelligence deposits ideas into your consciousness, insights that contain the seeds of transformation and prosperity. The journey becomes one of learning to recognize these ideas when they appear, accepting them as divine communication, working with them intelligently, and most importantly, obeying their internal impulse even when your logical mind can't see the complete path forward. This process of recognition, acceptance, and obedience is what produces visible results in the material world. Think about every major breakthrough in your life, every significant opportunity that opened, every solution that appeared when you needed it most. If you trace it back to its origin, you'll discover it began as an idea, an intuition, an impulse that seemed to come from somewhere beyond your ordinary thinking. The people who consistently experience abundance have learned to trust these internal communications and act on them quickly before doubt and fear can interfere. This is where most people sabotage their own success without realizing it. An inspired idea comes through their consciousness. Maybe it's a business concept, a creative project, a way to solve a current problem, a connection to make, a book to read, a person to contact. But instead of immediately working with this divine download, they start analyzing it to death. They want guarantees. They need to see the whole plan. They wait for external validation. By the time they finish deliberating, the energy has dissipated and the opportunity has passed. Dynamic faith operates with what I call divine urgency. When an idea that feels inspired arrives in your consciousness, you honor it immediately. You don't need to understand every step of the journey before you take the first step. You trust that the same intelligence that gave you the idea will also provide the means to execute it. This creates a partnership between your human effort and divine provision that can produce results that seem almost miraculous to outside observers. The hidden truth is that every moment you're either exercising dynamic faith or defaulting to static faith. There's no neutral position. When you hesitate on inspired action, you're choosing static faith. When you move forward despite uncertainty, you're choosing dynamic faith. The impact of this choice compounds over time, creating either a life of increasing expansion or a pattern of missed opportunities. Now, this understanding leads us to a specific technique for prayer that transforms it from pleading with God to partnering with divine intelligence. Write in the comments, "I choose dynamic faith," if you're ready to start moving with inspired action rather than waiting for permission. This technique for prayer that transforms it from pleading to partnering operates on 3 precise steps that create a fundamentally different relationship with divine intelligence. Scientific prayer isn't about begging God for favors or trying to convince a distant deity to pay attention to your problems. It's about aligning your consciousness with the way spiritual law actually operates, creating the optimal conditions for manifestation to occur naturally. The first step is recognition, and this is where most people miss the mark entirely. You begin by declaring with your full awareness, God is, nothing else. Not God is somewhere up there, not God might help if I'm good enough, but God is, present, active, the only real power operating in the universe right now. This recognition dissolves the illusion that there are opposing forces, competing powers, or circumstances stronger than divine intelligence. When you truly recognize this, fear begins to lose its grip on your consciousness. The second step is unification, and this is where the transformation becomes personal and immediate. Here you declare with complete conviction, "I am one with God, no separation." This isn't a religious concept you're trying to believe. It's a spiritual fact you're choosing to recognize. There is no distance between you and divine intelligence. You're not a separate being hoping for help from outside yourself. You are the very presence of God, expressing itself in unique form through your consciousness, your decisions, your actions. The third step is affirmation, and this is where most people finally understand the revolutionary difference between supplication and spiritual science. Instead of asking, pleading, or hoping, you declare with clarity and authority what you desire to manifest. You're not trying to convince God to give you something. You're aligning your consciousness with what's already true in the spiritual realm and claiming it as your present reality. This process works because it engages you as an active participant in creation rather than a passive recipient of whatever circumstances might deliver. The impact is immediate and profound, because you're operating from the recognition of your true identity and power rather than from a sense of separation and limitation. Here's where the journey reveals something most people never consider. The greatest obstacle to this kind of dynamic spiritual practice isn't external circumstances or lack of knowledge. It's mental laziness. This might sound harsh, but mental laziness is actually more dangerous than active error, because at least people who are making mistakes in action are moving and can rectify their course. They're engaged with life, trying things, learning from results. Mental laziness, on the other hand, keeps you completely stuck. It's the habit of avoiding the consistent mental work required to maintain elevated consciousness. It's settling for automatic thinking, repetitive patterns, unconscious reactions. It's knowing what you should do, but finding reasons to postpone it. It's having insights during moments of inspiration, but failing to follow through with practical application. What makes mental laziness so spiritually dangerous is that it's ultimately a practical denial of your divine sonship. When you consistently avoid the mental discipline required to align with spiritual truth, you're unconsciously affirming that you're just a human being, subject to circumstances, rather than a spiritual being with creative power. Every time you choose the path of least mental resistance, you're reinforcing a limited identity that keeps you trapped in cycles of struggle and limitation. The hidden truth behind this revelation is that God cannot move through a consciousness that refuses to engage actively. With life, divine intelligence requires partnership, not passivity. It needs minds that are willing to think clearly, make conscious choices, and take inspired action. Mental laziness blocks this partnership, creating an internal resistance that prevents the natural flow of good into your experience. Now, there's a specific practice that can break through years of mental laziness in just a few weeks, and it involves a simple daily commitment that most people underestimate. Write in the comments, "I choose mental activity," if you're ready to break through the patterns of spiritual passivity. This practice that can revolutionize your mental activity and break through years of spiritual passivity is called the 3 conscious daily actions technique. It's so simple that most people dismiss it, yet so powerful that it can transform your entire relationship with personal power and divine partnership within weeks. Here's how the transformation works. Every single day, you commit to performing 3 deliberate acts that take you completely out of the comfort zone of automatic thinking. These don't need to be dramatic or life-changing actions. They just need to be conscious. Maybe it's writing down one clear intention for the day, instead of just hoping things work out. Perhaps it's making that phone call you've been postponing, organizing one drawer that's been bothering you, or even something as simple as choosing gratitude instead of complaint when someone asks how you're doing. Magic happens because each conscious action, however minimal it might seem, affirms your dominion over inertia. You're declaring to your subconscious mind, to the universe, and to yourself that you are not a victim of circumstances or a prisoner of habits. You are a conscious being capable of deliberate choice, and you prove it through action rather than just intention. What's happening behind the scenes during this practice is extraordinary. Your nervous system begins to remember what it feels like to be in control. Your confidence starts building not through positive thinking, but through evidence of your own capacity to choose consciously. Your mind develops what I call spiritual momentum, the ability to initiate action from inspiration rather than waiting for external pressure to force you into movement. This daily practice creates the perfect foundation for something even more powerful to emerge in your life: clear purpose. There is no greater power than a mind that knows exactly what it wants to accomplish and why. When you develop this clarity, something remarkable happens that most people never experience. You develop spiritual magnetism. Here's the hidden truth about how purpose operates in the spiritual realm. Where there is true purpose, not manufactured goals or borrowed ambitions, but authentic purpose that emerges from your deepest self, there is automatic spiritual magnetism. The universe begins responding to you with a speed and precision that can seem almost miraculous to people who are still operating from confusion or scattered intentions. This isn't wishful thinking or metaphysical theory. This is how consciousness actually works when it's aligned and focused. A clear mind about its purpose sends out a specific vibration that attracts corresponding opportunities, people, resources, and circumstances. It's like tuning into a radio frequency. Once you're locked onto the right station, the signal comes through clearly and consistently. The reason this works so powerfully is that purpose aligned with God is never just personal ambition or ego-driven desire. True purpose is an expression of your inner being, the unique way that divine intelligence wants to express itself through your particular consciousness, talents, and life circumstances. When you discover and align with this authentic purpose, you're not trying to force the universe to comply with your wishes. You're allowing yourself to become a willing channel for something much larger than your individual desires. This creates a partnership between your human effort and divine intelligence that produces results far beyond what either could accomplish alone. Your decisions become guided by wisdom rather than fear. Your actions carry a sense of rightness that others can feel. Opportunities begin appearing that seem perfectly timed and surprisingly aligned with your deepest intentions. The journey of discovering this kind of clear purpose isn't always immediate, but there's a specific process that can help you uncover what your soul actually came here to express. Write in the comments, "I attract my purpose," if you're feeling this magnetic quality starting to emerge in your own life. This process of uncovering what your soul actually came here to express begins with learning to distinguish between true desire and manufactured ambition. This distinction is absolutely crucial because most people spend their entire lives chasing desires that aren't even authentically theirs. True desire in its spiritual root is revelation. It's a spark of your inner being trying to open its way into the material plane. It emerges from the depths of your consciousness as a form of divine communication, showing you the direction your soul wants to move. But not all desires are true desires. Many of the things we think we want are actually induced by worldly suggestion, comparison with others, or fear-based programming we've absorbed from our environment. These false desires feel hollow when you examine them closely. They're motivated by what you think will impress others, what society says you should want, or what you believe will finally make you feel secure or worthy. Take a moment to hit the like button if something in this message clicked for you. It's a small action that makes a big difference in helping these principles reach the people who are ready to apply them. Here's how you can recognize the difference. True desires feel expansive when you think about them. They energize you, connect you to something larger than yourself, and seem to call forth the best of your abilities and character. False desires often feel contractive. They're usually about getting something to fill a void, proving something to someone else, or achieving security through external means. The transformation in your life happens when you learn to honor only the true desires and release the false ones. This process naturally leads you to discover your authentic mission, and there's a specific practice that can accelerate this discovery dramatically. Every serious student of spiritual law should write their own mission statement. Not a corporate-style document, but an essential affirmation of what your soul has come to express in this lifetime. This isn't a casual exercise you do once and forget about. This mission statement becomes a living document that shapes your consciousness and guides your decisions. The method matters tremendously. You must write it by hand, not type it on a computer. There's something about the physical act of writing that engages different neural pathways and connects you more deeply to your authentic self. The words should be written in first person and present tense, as if your mission is already being fulfilled right now. Once you've written this declaration of your soul's purpose, you read it every morning upon awakening. This timing is critical because your conscious mind is most receptive in those first moments of the day, before the mental chatter and external pressures begin demanding your attention. By reading your mission statement during this receptive state, you're programming your subconscious mind to organize your entire day around your highest purpose. The impact of this practice is profound and immediate. Your decisions throughout the day begin aligning automatically with your stated mission. Opportunities that support your purpose become more visible. People who can help you advance your mission start appearing in your life. Resources flow toward you because you've created clarity about what you're trying to accomplish and why it matters. What's happening behind the scenes is that you're creating coherence between your conscious intentions and your subconscious programming. Instead of operating from scattered goals and conflicting desires, your entire system becomes focused on a single, clear direction. This creates the spiritual magnetism we discussed earlier, but now it's laser-focused and consistently reinforced through daily practice. The journey deepens when you realize that this kind of purposeful living naturally leads to a completely different relationship with abundance, one that operates through what spiritual teachers call the law of circulation. Write in the comments, "I know my mission," if you're ready to start living from this level of clarity and purpose. This completely different relationship with abundance that emerges from purposeful living operates through one of the most precise spiritual laws in existence, the law of return. Most people think of giving and receiving as emotional transactions, but this law operates with mathematical precision that would make a physicist envious. Every thought, word, and action is literally a seed that returns multiplied. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual sentiment. It's a mechanical law that obeys principle with absolute exactitude. Here's what's happening behind the scenes when you understand this law correctly. It doesn't depend on luck, hidden intentions, or human judgment about whether you deserve what you receive. It operates based purely on what you set in motion through your consciousness and actions. When you plant apple seeds, you get apple trees. Not because the universe is being nice to you, but because that's how seeds work. The same precision applies to thoughts, words, and actions. The transformation in your mindset happens when you realize you're always sowing something. In every moment, through every decision, every word you speak, every action you take, you're planting seeds in the invisible realm that will eventually produce visible results. This makes you incredibly conscious about what you're putting into circulation because you know with certainty that it's all coming back multiplied. This understanding leads to a revolutionary approach to giving that most people have completely misunderstood. True charity in the Hebrew tradition is called Sedaka, and its meaning reveals something profound about how abundance actually circulates. Sedaka doesn't mean giving out of pity or compassion. It means doing justice through the conscious circulation of good. It's based on the recognition that everything you have originally came from the same source that provides for everyone else. When you give from this consciousness, understanding that everything you possess flows from God, and that by sharing it, you're not losing anything but rather participating in divine justice. You're practicing what I call circulating justice. You're acknowledging that you're not the owner of your resources. You're the steward. You're not giving away your security. You're demonstrating your understanding of how security actually works. This creates a completely different relationship with money, possessions, and resources. Instead of hoarding out of fear that there won't be enough, you circulate with confidence because you know the source is inexhaustible. Instead of giving reluctantly because you feel obligated, you give joyfully because you understand you're participating in a universal system that ensures everyone's needs are met when the circulation flows freely. The impact of this understanding on your financial life is extraordinary. When you give with this consciousness, you're essentially telling the universe, "I know I'm not dependent on this particular amount because I'm dependent on God." The universe responds with remarkable consistency by returning that confidence to you in multiplied form. It's not magic, it's law. The journey deepens when you realize that this law of circulation applies not just to money, but to every form of energy exchange. Your time, attention, knowledge, skills, emotional support, and spiritual understanding. Everything you share from a consciousness of abundance returns to you through channels you could never have predicted or planned. Now, there's a specific practice that can help you apply this law with scientific precision, and it involves understanding how your mental environment either supports or sabotages this natural circulation. Write in the comments, "I trust the circulation," if you're ready to participate consciously in this divine system of exchange. This practice that helps you apply the law of circulation with scientific precision begins with understanding that every act of giving is actually a declaration of active faith. When you give consciously, you're making a powerful statement to the universe. "I know I don't depend on this specific amount because I depend on God." This isn't just a nice sentiment, it's a precise communication that triggers an equally precise response from the spiritual realm. The universe responds with remarkable consistency. Well, if you truly know that, then I'll return it multiplied. This exchange happens not because the universe is rewarding your generosity, but because you've demonstrated a level of consciousness that can handle greater circulation. You've proven that you understand the difference between the temporary container and the eternal source. Here's what's happening behind the scenes during this process. When you give from genuine faith rather than obligation or manipulation, you're aligning your actions with your deepest spiritual understanding. This creates coherence between what you believe and how you behave. And this coherence is what activates the law of return with such precision. The universe doesn't respond to your words or even your intentions. It responds to your demonstrated consciousness. But here's where most people sabotage this entire process without realizing it. The law of circulation and return operates optimally when your consciousness is maintained at an elevated frequency. However, your soul cannot maintain itself elevated if you're daily exposed to defeatist conversations, acid criticisms, mundane judgments, cutting jokes, catastrophe news, and fear-tinted opinions that permeate most social environments. This constant exposure to negative mental atmospheres drains your inner strength and weakens your vibrational frequency more than most people realize. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has holes in the bottom. No matter how much positive energy you put in through prayer, meditation, or conscious giving, it leaks out through unconscious absorption of mental poison from your environment. The impact is immediate and measurable. When you spend hours listening to complaints, gossip, cynical commentary, or fear-based news, your own thinking gradually shifts to match that frequency. You start noticing problems more than solutions. You begin expecting difficulties rather than opportunities. Your natural optimism gets eroded by the collective pessimism of your mental environment. This creates a vicious cycle where your weakened consciousness affects your ability to give with genuine faith, which diminishes the power of the law of return in your life, which reinforces scarcity thinking, which makes you more susceptible to negative environmental influences. Breaking this cycle requires a level of consciousness about your mental diet that most people never develop. The transformation happens when you realize that protecting your mental environment is just as important as choosing healthy food for your body. You wouldn't knowingly drink poison, but most people unconsciously consume mental poison for hours every day through the conversations they participate in, the media they consume, and the energy they allow into their awareness. The journey of conscious living demands that you become incredibly selective about what you allow into your mental space. This isn't about judgment or superiority, it's about spiritual hygiene. Just as you wash your hands to prevent physical contamination, you need to cleanse your mental space to prevent consciousness contamination. Now, there's a specific technique that can help you rapidly detoxify your mental environment while simultaneously strengthening your ability to maintain elevated consciousness consistently. Write in the comments, "I protect my energy," if you're ready to take responsibility for the quality of your mental atmosphere. This technique that can rapidly detoxify your mental environment and strengthen your elevated consciousness is called the negative conversation fast, and it's more powerful than any physical diet you could ever undertake. The practice involves abstaining for 7 consecutive days from participating in, or even listening to, any dialogue that contains destructive criticism, complaints, mockery, gossip, condemnation, or tragic worldview. This isn't just avoiding obviously negative people. It means temporarily stepping away from conversations that drain your mental energy, even when they come from people you care about. The transformation that happens during this 7-day period is extraordinary. Most people don't realize how Much mental energy they lose every day through unconscious participation in energy-depleting conversations. When you commit to this fast, you suddenly become aware of how pervasive negative communication is in our culture. You start noticing that many social interactions are actually collective complaint sessions disguised as normal conversation. What's happening behind the scenes during this practice is that your consciousness begins operating at its natural frequency instead of being constantly pulled down to match the lower vibrations around you. Your mind becomes clearer, your intuition sharper, your natural optimism stronger. You start seeing solutions where you previously saw only problems. Your decision-making improves because you're not filtering everything through layers of absorbed negativity. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. This fast only works if you simultaneously replace the negative input with positive mental nourishment. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if you remove negative conversation without adding elevated communication, you'll simply return to old patterns once the 7 days are over. This is where the concept of master alliances becomes absolutely essential for sustained transformation. Master alliances are deliberate conscious bonds you create with people who think big, seek truth, study consistently, pray regularly, and prosper from within rather than depending solely on external circumstances. These aren't casual friendships based on convenience or entertainment. They're strategic relationships designed to support everyone involved in their highest development and most ambitious goals. The process of creating these alliances requires intentionality and courage. You actively seek out people who are already living at the level of consciousness you want to develop. You meet with them regularly to read meaningful material together, meditate, plan projects, and engage in conversations that elevate everyone's thinking. The golden rule for these gatherings is simple: talk about ideas, not people. Discuss the future you're creating, not the past you're escaping. This shift in conversational focus creates a completely different mental atmosphere. Instead of dissecting what's wrong with other people or rehashing past disappointments, you're exploring possibilities, sharing insights, planning improvements, and encouraging each other's growth. The impact on your consciousness is immediate and cumulative. Your mind begins operating in solution mode rather than problem mode. What makes master alliances so powerful is that they create what I call consciousness multiplication. When multiple people with elevated intentions come together regularly, their combined mental energy creates a field that's greater than the sum of its parts. Ideas emerge that none of them would have accessed alone. Solutions appear that seem to come from outside the group. Opportunities manifest that serve everyone's highest good. The journey of conscious living accelerates dramatically when you have this kind of supportive mental environment, because you're no longer swimming against the current of collective negativity. Write in the comments, "I choose my alliances," if you're ready to start building these kinds of consciousness-elevating relationships. When you start building these consciousness-elevating relationships, something profound begins happening that most people never experience in ordinary friendships. The people in your master alliance start offering you something invaluable that the average person actually fears and avoids: genuine feedback and correction. This is where the real acceleration in personal growth occurs, because the spiritually mature person doesn't fear judgment when it comes from wisdom and love. Here's what separates truly conscious individuals from those who remain stuck in ego-driven patterns. The person who lives in spiritual principle knows that well-received correction doesn't take anything away from them. On the contrary, it polishes, refines, and elevates their character and effectiveness. Just as gold doesn't fear the fire that purifies it, the soul that's committed to growth welcomes the refining process that removes impurities and reveals its true brilliance. Most people have this completely backwards. They interpret any form of correction as an attack on their worth or competence. They become defensive, make excuses, or shut down emotionally when someone points out an area for improvement. This reaction reveals that they're identifying with their current limitations rather than with their potential for growth. They're defending their problems instead of embracing their solutions. The transformation happens when you realize that every piece of honest feedback is actually a gift. When someone takes the time to observe your patterns and offer insights about how you could be more effective, they're giving you access to blind spots you can't see yourself. They're providing you with information that could accelerate your development by months or even years. This understanding leads to a powerful practice that can revolutionize your rate of personal growth. The feedback journal. This isn't just any notebook. It's a dedicated space where you register every significant observation, comment, suggestion, and criticism you receive from others, especially from mentors and conscious friends who have earned your respect through their own demonstrated wisdom and results. Here's how this practice transforms your relationship with feedback. Every time someone offers you an observation about your behavior, your communication style, your blind spots, or your patterns, you write it down with the date and context. But here's the crucial part. You also write a statement of gratitude for each piece of feedback received. This might sound mechanical at first, but it completely rewrites your emotional response to correction. Instead of feeling hurt, defensive, or diminished when someone points out an area for improvement, you start feeling grateful. Your nervous system begins associating feedback with growth opportunities rather than with threats to your ego. This shift in perception is absolutely revolutionary because it means you can now learn from every interaction and relationship in your life. The hidden truth behind this practice is that it transforms you from being a victim of other people's opinions into being a conscious student of human dynamics. You stop taking feedback personally and start seeing it as valuable data about how your current approach is landing with others. This gives you incredible power to adjust your communication, refine your strategies, and optimize your effectiveness in every area of life. What's happening behind the scenes is that you're training your consciousness to be more interested in growth than in being right, more committed to effectiveness than to comfort, more focused on your potential than on your current limitations. This creates a momentum of continuous improvement that compounds over time. Now, there's a specific financial discipline that emerges naturally from this growth-oriented mindset, and it involves a completely different approach to managing money that most people never consider. Write in the comments, "I welcome feedback," if you're ready to see correction as acceleration rather than criticism. This financial discipline that emerges naturally from a growth-oriented mindset involves a completely different approach to money management that most people never consider because they're too focused on how much they earn rather than how consciously they allocate what they receive. When you're committed to continuous improvement and feedback-driven growth, you start making decisions about money from wisdom rather than impulse, from vision rather than fear. The system that supports this conscious approach to finances is elegantly simple, yet profoundly effective. It's called the 70-10-10-10 plan, and it transforms your relationship with money by giving every dollar a specific purpose before you're tempted to spend it unconsciously. You divide all net income into 4 fixed proportions that create balance, security, generosity, and growth simultaneously. 70% goes toward living expenses, your food, housing, transportation, utilities, and conscious recreation. This forces you to live within a defined framework, rather than expanding your lifestyle to consume whatever income happens to arrive. 10% becomes your giving fund, activating the law of circulation we discussed earlier. Another 10% goes into savings as what I call peaceful reserve. Not fearful hoarding, but wise preparation that creates inner calm. The final 10% gets reinvested in yourself, your education, ideas, projects, and personal development. Here's what's happening behind the scenes when you implement this system. You're training your consciousness to think strategically rather than reactively about money. Instead of wondering where your income disappeared to at the end of each month, you're directing it purposefully toward outcomes that support your long-term vision and spiritual development. But the real transformation occurs when you start distinguishing between what I call seed expense and burden expense. This distinction is absolutely crucial because it determines whether your spending moves you toward abundance or keeps you trapped in cycles of financial stress. Seed expense is made with vision, purpose, and spiritual alignment. These are investments that open paths, generate fruits, and return enriched over time. When you buy a book that expands your consciousness, invest in a course that develops your skills, purchase tools that increase your effectiveness, or support causes that align with your values, you're making seed expenses. The energy behind these decisions feels expansive and purposeful. Burden expense originates in anxiety, the desire to appear successful, or the need to compensate for inner voids. This includes purchases made to impress others, acquisitions that temporarily numb emotional pain, or accumulations that create more stress than joy. Burden expenses feel contractive and often leave you with buyer's remorse even when you can afford them. The hidden truth about financial freedom isn't about earning more money, it's about making more conscious decisions. With the money you already have, when most of your expenses are seed expenses that support your growth and align with your values, money becomes a tool for expansion rather than a source of anxiety. When most of your expenses are burden expenses driven by unconscious impulses, money becomes a constant source of stress, regardless of how much you earn. This awareness transforms your decision-making process completely. Before any significant purchase, you start asking yourself, is this a seed that will grow and multiply, or is this a burden that will weigh me down? The answer usually comes immediately and clearly when you're honest with yourself. Now, there's a specific principle about timing and action that can accelerate all of these practices dramatically, and it involves understanding how to move with what I call divine urgency. Write in the comments, I choose seed expenses, if you're ready to make your money work for your highest vision rather than your lowest impulses. This principle about making your money work for your highest vision rather than your lowest impulses leads naturally to understanding what true financial strength actually looks like. Most people confuse financial strength with accumulation, but real financial power consists of living light, not scarcely. There's a crucial distinction here that changes everything about how you approach abundance and security. Living light doesn't mean living with little, it means living with just enough. It means not being tied to the unnecessary, walking through life without useless burdens, understanding that true abundance isn't measured by what you possess, but by what you can liberate. When you're carrying only what serves your purpose and brings you genuine joy, you move through life with a freedom that people weighed down by excess possessions never experience. This lightness creates a form of security that external accumulation can never provide. When you're not attached to maintaining a lifestyle that requires constant stress to sustain, you have options. When your needs are clear and your wants are conscious, you can make decisions from wisdom rather than desperation. When your life isn't cluttered with burden expenses, you have resources available for opportunities that align with your vision. The transformation happens when you realize that living light actually increases your abundance rather than limiting it. You're no longer spending energy maintaining, organizing, ensuring, and worrying about things that don't truly serve you. That liberated energy becomes available for creativity, relationships, purpose, and the kind of experiences that genuinely enrich your life. This understanding about living light connects directly to a principle about timing and action that can accelerate all of these practices dramatically. The principle of divine urgency. Most people have this completely backwards when it comes to taking inspired action. They think clarity should precede action. that they need to see the complete path before taking the first step, that security should arrive before they make their move. But here's the hidden truth that separates people who consistently manifest their visions from those who remain stuck in planning mode. Clarity doesn't precede inspired action, it follows it. Security doesn't arrive before the step, it comes after. True faith is measured not by what you think or believe in your mind, but by what you dare to do without external certainties. When you receive an inspired idea, whether it's about a career change, a creative project, a relationship decision, or even a financial investment, that inspiration comes with its own timing. It carries divine urgency that requires immediate response. If you honor that urgency and take action while the energy is fresh, the path illuminates itself step by step. If you hesitate, analyze, and wait for guarantees, that inspired energy dissipates and the opportunity often passes. This principle applies to every area of life, but it's especially crucial in financial decisions and career moves. The people who prosper consistently have learned to move with inspired action rather than waiting for perfect conditions. They understand that the universe responds to demonstrated faith, not theoretical faith. The journey of conscious living requires this willingness to act on inspiration, even when your logical mind can't see how everything will work out. This doesn't mean being reckless or impulsive. Inspired action has a different quality than emotional reaction. It feels aligned, purposeful, and connected to something larger than your personal agenda. Now, this principle of divine timing leads us to understand how abundance actually flows through multiple channels rather than depending on single sources of provision. Write in the comments, "I move with inspiration," if you're ready to start trusting divine timing rather than demanding human guarantees. This understanding about trusting divine timing rather than demanding human guarantees leads to a specific technique that can revolutionize your ability to manifest inspired ideas consistently. It's called the thought-word step technique, and it operates on a sacred framework that most people completely ignore. The 24-hour window of opportunity that opens every time you receive genuine inspiration. Here's how this transformation works. Every inspired idea that comes through your consciousness must become word, and every word must become action in no more than 24 hours. This isn't an arbitrary time limit, it's a sacred framework that obeys an inner rhythm of creation. Inspiration has a body, meaning it carries specific energy that needs to be given form. If that energy isn't incarnated in some kind of action within 24 hours, it literally becomes smoke and dissipates back into the invisible realm. Think about this in terms of your own experience. How many brilliant ideas have you had that felt absolutely perfect in the moment, but by the time you got around to acting on them weeks or months later, they felt flat and lifeless? That's because you missed the window when the inspiration was alive and pulsing with creative energy. The idea itself might still be good, but the divine momentum behind it has moved on. The practice itself is elegantly simple. When an inspired idea arrives, whether it's about a project, a conversation you need to have, a connection to make, or an opportunity to pursue, you immediately speak it aloud or write it down. This transforms the invisible thought into visible word, giving it a more concrete form. Then, within 24 hours, you take some kind of action related to that idea, even if it's small. Maybe it's making a phone call, sending an email, researching something online, or even just taking a symbolic first step. What's happening behind the scenes during this process is extraordinary. You're demonstrating to the universe that you're a reliable partner in the creative process. You're showing that when divine intelligence sends you ideas, you honor them with immediate attention and practical follow-through. This creates a feedback loop, where you begin receiving more frequent and more powerful inspirations because you've proven yourself trustworthy with the ones you've already received. This technique works so effectively because it bridges the gap between spiritual receptivity and practical manifestation. Most people are either good at receiving ideas but poor at implementing them, or good at taking action but disconnected from divine guidance. The thought-word-step process unifies both capacities. But here's where this understanding deepens into something even more profound. As you practice this technique consistently, you begin to recognize that while the ideas and opportunities may come through different channels, there's only one eternal source of all provision: God. Not your employment, not your clients, not the government, not inheritance, not even your personal abilities. These are all conduits, vessels, means of delivery, but the source itself is unique, inexhaustible, and perfect. This recognition transforms your entire relationship with security and abundance. When you understand that God is the source and everything else is simply a channel, you stop clinging desperately to particular jobs, relationships, or income streams. You stop living in fear that if you lose this specific opportunity, you'll be left with nothing. Confusing channel with source is what I call economic idolatry, worshipping the delivery system instead of recognizing the supplier. The journey of conscious abundance requires this fundamental shift in perception, because when you're attached to channels rather than connected to the source, you limit your capacity to receive through multiple pathways. Write in the comments, "God is my source," if you're ready to release attachment to specific channels and trust the unlimited supplier. When you release attachment to specific channels and truly trust the unlimited supplier, something remarkable begins happening in your financial life. You start naturally developing what I call multiple streams of provision, and this diversification isn't driven by fear or insecurity. It's driven by spiritual obedience to the principle of expansion. Here's how this transformation manifests practically. You begin mapping your income sources across 4 distinct types of flow, each with its own characteristics and purpose. Active income depends directly on your time and energy, your job, your services, your direct professional efforts. This represents your current capacity to exchange value with the world. Passive income continues flowing without your constant presence. Rental properties, royalties, systems you've created that operate independently. This reflects wisdom you've accumulated and put to work. Creative income emerges from talents converted into form. Artistic works, intellectual property, products born from your unique gifts and vision. This is where your soul's expression becomes a source of material provision. Investment income comes from returns on capital and participation in other people's projects and ventures. This demonstrates your faith in growth and your willingness to partner with expanding enterprises. What's happening behind the scenes when you consciously develop all 4 types of income is that you're creating a robust ecosystem of provision that can't be disrupted by any single economic change or circumstance. You're demonstrating to the universe that you understand abundance flows through variety, not scarcity through dependence on one source. But here's the hidden truth that accelerates this entire process. You must actively open at least one new channel every 6 months. This isn't driven by ambition or greed. It's driven by obedience to spiritual law. As Ecclesiastes teaches, don't let your hand rest. You don't know which seed will bear the most abundant fruit, but you must keep sowing. This regular channel opening practice keeps you in a state of creative expansion rather than defensive maintenance. Every 6 months, you prayerfully consider what new avenue of service, what unexplored talent, what innovative approach might become a conduit for greater good to flow through your life. Maybe it's developing a skill you've always been curious about, exploring a business idea that's been percolating in your consciousness, or finding a way to monetize knowledge you've accumulated. The key is that this exploration comes from prayer and inner guidance rather than from external pressure or comparison with others. You're asking divine intelligence to show you the next channel to develop, and then you move with faith even when you can't see the complete outcome. This practice transforms your mindset from, "I hope my current situation stays stable," to, "I wonder what new possibilities are trying to emerge through me." Instead of clinging to what you have, you're constantly making yourself available for what wants to be born. This creates a momentum of perpetual growth that compounds over time. The journey deepens when you realize that this principle of multiple channels applies not just to income, but to every form of value exchange in your life. Your impact, your relationships, your service to others, your sources of joy and fulfillment, all of these benefit from conscious diversification. Now, there's a profound understanding about the ultimate purpose of all this abundance that brings everything full circle to the original spiritual principles. Write in the comments, "I open new channels," if you're ready to expand beyond your current streams and explore what wants to emerge through you. This understanding about expanding beyond your current streams and exploring what wants to emerge through you leads to the most profound realization of all about authentic prosperity. When you truly grasp these principles and begin living from this elevated consciousness, something inevitable begins happening that reveals the ultimate purpose behind all spiritual abundance. It naturally flows into service. Here's what's happening behind the scenes in the life of anyone who has genuinely awakened to their divine inheritance. All authentic prosperity seeks by its own nature to be shared. It's not something you have to force or manufacture through guilt or obligation. Just as the river doesn't drink its own water, the sun doesn't receive its own heat, and the tree doesn't consume its own fruit. A consciousness that has been awakened to abundance becomes a natural channel for blessing others. This isn't about charity in the traditional sense or giving away what you need for yourself. This is about recognizing that when divine intelligence flows through you to create prosperity, that same intelligence wants to use you as a conduit to bless others. The abundance you receive is never just for your personal comfort. It's designed to make you a more effective agent of positive transformation in the world. The journey reveals that the true measure of prosperity has nothing to do with the size of your bank account, the value of your possessions, or even the impressiveness of your lifestyle. The real measurement is how much you transform the environment around you, who is freer, more inspired, more illuminated because you understood these principles and began living from them. How many lives have been elevated because you grasped that God is your source and started operating from that unshakable foundation. This perspective completely revolutionizes your relationship with success and achievement. Instead of asking, "What can I get from this situation?" you start asking, "What can I give to this situation that will elevate everyone involved?" Instead of measuring your progress by what you've accumulated, you measure it by how many people have been positively impacted by your presence, your words, your example, your generosity. What makes this so powerful is that when you operate from this consciousness, abundance multiplies exponentially. The universe can trust you with greater resources because you've demonstrated that you understand the true purpose of prosperity. You're not hoarding for selfish gain, you're stewarding for collective benefit. You become a safe place for divine intelligence to invest because it knows that whatever flows through you will be used wisely and shared generously. The hidden truth is that this kind of service-oriented prosperity creates a positive feedback loop that benefits everyone. As you bless others, you create more channels for blessing to flow back to you. As you elevate others, you create an environment where elevation becomes the norm. As you share wisdom, opportunities, and resources, you create a community of abundance rather than a culture of scarcity. The impact of this understanding extends far beyond individual transformation. When enough people begin operating from these principles, it literally changes the economic and social atmosphere of entire communities. Collaboration replaces competition, generosity replaces hoarding, vision replaces fear. Now, there's a specific practice that can help you integrate all of these principles into a coherent lifestyle transformation. Write in the comments, "I serve through abundance," if you're ready to become a channel of blessing rather than just a collector of benefits. This specific practice that can help you integrate all of these principles into a coherent lifestyle transformation is what I call the 90-day abundance immersion. This isn't just another self-improvement challenge. It's a structured journey that allows you to experience firsthand how these spiritual laws operate when applied consistently over time. Here's how this transformation unfolds. For 90 consecutive days, you consciously apply each principle we've discussed, creating a daily rhythm that reinforces elevated consciousness rather than allowing it to fade back into old patterns. Every morning, you begin by reading your personal mission statement and your prosperity affirmations, not as empty ritual, but as active programming of your mental frequency for the day ahead. The practice deepens through written documentation of your journey. You keep a detailed record of inspired ideas that come through your consciousness, specific steps you take in response to those ideas, corrections you apply based on feedback from mentors and circumstances, and most importantly, the visible fruits that begin manifesting as these principles take root in your daily experience. What makes this practice so powerful is the accountability element built into it. Once each week, you give testimony to someone about what you're practicing and what you're discovering. This isn't about boasting or trying to impress anyone. It's about articulating your experience in a way that reinforces your own understanding, while potentially inspiring others who might be ready for similar transformation. The weekly testimony serves multiple purposes. It forces you to reflect consciously on your progress, rather than just moving through the practices automatically. It helps you recognize patterns and breakthroughs that you might otherwise take for granted. Most importantly, it begins the process of becoming a blessing to others through sharing wisdom rather than hoarding it for yourself. What's happening behind the scenes during this 90-day period is extraordinary. Your consciousness undergoes a complete rewiring as these principles move from intellectual concepts to embodied realities. Your decision-making process transforms. Your relationship with money, opportunities, and challenges shifts fundamentally. Your capacity to recognize and act on divine guidance increases dramatically. The journey reveals something that most people never experience: what it feels like to live in partnership with divine intelligence rather than struggling against circumstances you can't control. You begin operating from what I call kingdom consciousness, where every prayer naturally becomes action, every affirmation translates into concrete steps, and every step you take becomes a blessing that extends beyond your personal benefit. This is where the true purpose of all spiritual abundance training reveals itself. You're not learning these principles just to improve your own life, though that certainly happens. You're developing the consciousness and skills necessary to become an instrument of positive transformation in the world. You're learning to multiply the common good rather than just accumulating personal advantage. The impact extends far beyond your individual circumstances. As you embody these principles, you become living proof that another way of being is possible. Your example gives others permission to explore their own divine inheritance. Your prosperity creates opportunities for others to prosper. Your consciousness contributes to elevating the collective awareness of abundance rather than scarcity. What happens after these 90 days is that you face a choice that will determine everything about your future relationship with abundance and spiritual growth. You can either return to your previous patterns, treating this as an interesting experiment that's now complete, or you can recognize that you've just stepped into the beginning of a completely new way of living that's designed to expand continuously for the rest of your life. The people who experience permanent transformation are those who understand that these principles aren't a temporary practice, they're a lifestyle. They've tasted what it feels like to live in partnership with divine intelligence, and they refuse to settle for anything less. They've seen how consciousness creates circumstances, and they commit to maintaining elevated consciousness as their new normal. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're clearly someone who's ready for this level of transformation. You wouldn't have invested this much time and attention unless something deep within you recognized the truth in these principles. That recognition is itself a form of divine guidance, showing you that you're prepared for the kind of life these teachings can create. I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel because what we share here isn't just entertainment or motivation, it's practical wisdom that can genuinely change how you experience life. Every video is designed to give you tools and insights that you can apply immediately to create real results in your relationships, your finances, your purpose, and your inner peace. If this message resonated with you and you made it all the way to the end, let me know by writing "This message was meant for me" in the comments. It's always incredible to see how many people are drawn to these truths when they're ready to receive them. And if you felt that connection we've been building throughout this conversation, I'd be grateful if you'd hit the like button. When you do that, it helps this content reach others who might be exactly where you were when you first clicked on this video. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how to maintain this elevated consciousness when life gets challenging and circumstances try to pull you back into old patterns. Click and continue with me over there because the journey is just beginning.